This video gives a brief overview of each character in a tier list format. Please be aware that Genshin Impact for the most part is a single player experience, and the intention of this tier list video is to evaluate characters based on their performance in the Spiral Abyss and other time trial challenges. One of the first party members to join you in the game, Amber's primary role consists of puzzle solving before you acquire a better archer or pyro user. Her whole design is rather underwhelming since Amber suffers from an identity crisis. Her elemental skill deploys a dummy that pulls aggro from the enemies but only explodes for a minuscule amount of damage. Overall, Amber's weak damage output and bad mix of support and burst roll makes her only worth investing into if you like her design or prefer playing a low tier character. She is the only character in the game so far who can counter enemy attacks. Her elemental skill, Tight Collar, allows her to enter a stance that absorbs enemy attacks and upon release deals a significant amount of damage depending on how well the timing was. But what truly makes her shine is her elemental burst. She will generate an electric field around her that will apply electric discharge to her attacks. Switching out to a character with more faster attack speed will melt enemies away while the burst is applied, and that's because electric damage scales directly with Beto's attack. This makes Beto a highly desirable teammate when paired with another character who excels at fast damage dealing, making the damage output insanely high. The only drawback is that her elemental burst has a long cooldown, making her less flexible in challenges with long durations. The only thing Bennett excels at is bad luck. At least, that's what the people of Teyvat believe in. But you'll most likely come to the same conclusion as Bennett's elemental skill Passion Overload can explode in his face, launching him backwards. This disrupts the flow of combat, and if you're fighting on cliffs, chances are you will fall to your death. But that's okay, he is supposed to be a support instead. His elemental burst creates a field around him that applies pyro to your attacks and also heals the first character if their health falls below 70%. But this puts him in a really weird spot. He can't deal damage properly and he can barely heal. What's left are the pyro attacks you can gain from his elemental burst. One of the few dedicated healers in the game. Because healing scales directly with her HP, she is going to be your most tanky character in the team. Her elemental skill creates a field around her that heals the current character you're playing with a total of 3 times, and you can further heal your team slightly by dealing damage while under the skill's effect. Due to the tricky nature of applying wet status on yourself and everyone surrounding you, if you mismanage your cryo or electro attacks, you will get frozen or shocked. Her elemental burst is simply a party-wide heal that restores significant amount of health. But because of its long cooldown, it's best to use it in emergency situations. Overall, she is an outstanding support character that will provide excellent heals to your team. Chongyun is currently the only character in the game that can almost provide consistent cryo buff for the team. His elemental skill deals damage to surrounding enemies and leaves a field that converts attacks into cryo damage. His burst has low cooldown and low energy cost, which makes him a very desirable damage dealer, if only for brief moments. But his damage output overall isn't the greatest, and his cryo buff only works for greatsword, polearm, and sword users. All in all, Chongyun is an excellent choice when building a close combat team by providing low cooldown support and burst attacks. Diluc does one thing and does it well: exceptionally high burst damage. His skill can be used to perform up to 3 flaming slashes, which can be mixed together with your regular basic attacks. Essentially, you can perform 3 basic attacks, end it with 1 flaming slash, and repeat the process 2 more times. On the last constellation upgrade, these flaming slashes no longer interrupt your basic attack combo, which deliver the most damage on the last hit, turning Diluc into a consistent damage dealer. Diluc's elemental burst releases a wave of energy in the form of a phoenix, knocking enemies away and exploding on its destination. Diluc's weapon also becomes enveloped in flames, making him instead deal pyro damage. Overall, he is your top choice when it comes to your best damage dealer in Pyro, but to unlock his strongest form requires maxing out his constellation fully, which is regarded to be nearly impossible for free-to-play players. This German princess has tamed the power of an electric raven. Although she may look like a character that's destined to be support, she's actually a gifted archer that can dish out some serious damage. Her elemental skill Knight Rider leaves her raven Oz on the battlefield, which deals damage every second and puts electro status on enemies. Her elemental burst transforms her into Oz himself, and for a brief moment she can travel in raven form, dealing electro damage to surrounding enemies. After transformation, she leaves Oz behind to fight for her once again. This essentially allows her to keep Oz on the battlefield for over 20 seconds. What also makes her really amazing is that she is only a 4-star character, which makes her a very free-to-play friendly character to use. She can both act as main damage dealer and support. The acting grandmaster of the knights herself, Jean, is quite a scary lady to have on your team. Her charged basic attack can launch enemies upward with a delayed fall time, making it exceptionally easy to control small groups of enemies. Her elemental skill, on the other hand, is on a whole nother level when it comes to having fun. She can either let out a short blast that scales very well with her attack, or she can hold the skill down and suck the enemies in and blast them away in a direction perfect for throwing them off in high places for instant kills. Her elemental burst heals the team and launches enemies in air, afterwards leaving a restorative field that provides continuous health regeneration. Jean is basically a utility character that can provide great burst damage and heal everyone in the process. She can also fill the niche of knocking enemies away, which can be especially useful in Spiral Abyss floors with no walls. The second character that joins your party voluntarily. His fate closely resembles Amber's, waiting to be replaced by another cryo user. He has a simple elemental skill that releases a small blast of cryo that deals very mediocre damage. His basic attacks are fine for a sword user, and his charge attack works similar to the main protagonist's. But the reason it's so hard to make Kaya viable is his elemental burst. It creates icicles around him that damage enemies in a very small area. Not only that, but they also deal underwhelming damage. Genshin beats her competition when it comes to mobility and speed. Her basic attacks have the fastest delivery, and her elemental skill allows her to traverse not only on land but air too. She can drop an electrified stiletto on the ground or even midair and then use her charge attack to trigger a powerful electro explosion. But what's really exciting is that instead of detonating the stiletto, she can activate the skill again and teleport directly back to it, which opens up many exploration and combat possibilities. Finally, her elemental burst makes her vanish and deal surrounding enemies massive electro damage. All of these skills come pre-packaged with short cooldown times and excellent scalable stats, making Genshin one of the most deadliest damage dealers in the game. Looks can be deceiving, or rather explosive. Klee's elemental skill throws bouncing bombs that leave field of mines after explosion. Although enemies caught in these mines only take small amounts of damage, she can actually trigger her skill twice, making it 2 times more dangerous. But the elemental burst is what truly makes her a menace. It will attack enemies around her, dealing considerable amounts of damage while she can still do her basic attacks or even throw more bombs from her skill. The only downside is that she loses the burst if you switch her out, so you need to keep her on the field. Luckily, she performs great as the main damage dealer. You can't have a gacha game without your typical man-eater. Sadly, this is the only part where Lisa excels at. For that, she is definitely an SS tier character. But when it comes to her elemental skill, you need to remain stationary and charge it to deliver damage that's only as good as how many conductive stacks you've applied. It also doesn't help that her elemental burst, while dealing excellent damage, has a large energy cost and pushes enemies out of its killing zone. She's great when you're starting out and can even act as a reasonable electro support, but her lack of survivability, slow cooldowns, and long setup makes her less desirable for more challenging Spiral Abyss floors. This self-proclaimed astrologist is also the master of water magic. Mona's elemental skill is similar to Amber's. She summons a water phantom that pulls the aggro of nearby enemies, dealing continuous hydro damage that also explodes after a set duration. Her dash makes her go underground and travels faster than anyone else in the game. Her elemental burst traps smaller creatures in a bubble that take increased damage and also have wet status on them. After the bubble pops, trapped enemies take massive damage. Mona's playstyle is a mix of support and fast burst damage, so she is an ideal party member to have when trying to fill for a more flexible role. One of the 3 Geo users that got released with the game. She can gather Star Jades by performing basic attacks which can be unleashed alongside her charged attack. While this is nice, you lose the accumulated Star Jades if you switch to a different character. But her real damage comes from a combination of elemental skill and burst. The skill places a jade screen that blocks enemy projectiles and deals damage when summoned initially, while her elemental burst unleashes a nasty projectile attack that deals increased damage if jade screen is already deployed. This combo attack can be achieved quite frequently due to the low cost of the elemental burst, but few things set her back in this tier list. First, she is of Geo element, which loses out on interaction with other elements. She also needs to be constantly repositioned to collect Geo crystals to keep the shield up, and her basic attack build-up loses potential if you switch her out. Overall, she is an excellent burst damage dealer that suffers from few setbacks. The maid from Knights of Favonius will most likely be in everyone's roster due to beginner wishes. Her elemental skill creates a Geo shield around her that persists even when switching to another party member. This shield can absorb damage and gives Noelle the ability to heal her team on her basic attacks. Her elemental burst deals small amount of damage to surrounding enemies and provides Noelle with 15 seconds of the following buffs. Basic attacks gain larger reach, damage is done in Geo element, and attack is increased based on Noelle's defense. She ends up as an awkward tank that doesn't really fit anywhere since her burst is underwhelming and her shield has a long cooldown of 24 seconds. Due to all of this, she can't really be used competitively in Spiral Abyss. A zombie girl that struggles with memory loss. Good thing she doesn't struggle with demolishing her enemies. Chi-Chi is the staple healer in Genshin Impact. High damage output paired with excellent healing. Her elemental skill summons an Ice Herald that follows the field character around, damaging close by enemies in set intervals. While Chi-Chi has it, any damage she deals will heal all party members, which scales with her attack. Now, this alone already makes her a superstar, but the cherry on top comes in the form of her elemental burst. She releases an attack that deals sizable damage and also tags the enemies with a talisman. Any character that attacks these tagged enemies in such way will heal themselves, which means you can start the fight with her burst and then unleash every other party member's burst without ever worrying of dying, since damage they receive during their active period will get healed from the marked enemies. Chi-Chi is an amazing healer that brings her own firepower into the fight. Raised by wolves, this Electro user doesn't mess around with his massive claymore. Razor is a high maintenance, high reward character that shows his true potential the longer you keep him on the field. Razor's Wolf Within is an elemental burst that provides increased attack speed as well as additional electro damage, while also making Razor immune to electro charge status. This elemental burst can be reused very frequently due to how his elemental skill works. Each time he uses it, he lands a claw attack on the enemies in front and generates one electro sigil, which increases his energy recharge rate. Gaining more of these sigils allows Razor to quickly regenerate his elemental burst and get back into Wolf Within. Razor's one and only role is to be the main damage dealer, so building a team around him is highly advised. A shy alchemist that brings her own chaotic potions to the battlefield. Sucrose is a pretty simple character in terms of complexity. The skill creates a whirlwind that pulls enemies in and damages them, while the elemental burst will do the same, except it will pull and launch enemies into the air 3 times in a row. The problem with elemental burst is that the cooldown and energy requirements are too high. Equipping her with elemental mastery or any items that provide reduced elemental burst cooldown could make her more viable, but at the moment her purpose is her elemental burst, the main protagonist of the story, or in other words, you. Currently, both the Geo and Animo versions of your hero are lackluster and get outclassed by nearly every other character in this tier list. But on the upside, you can unlock a lot of constellations for free just by progressing through the story, so the Traveler will feel very strong until late game or more difficult floors in the Spiral Abyss. Once we start receiving new content updates, the Traveler will be the master of all 7 elements. This puts your main protagonist in a lucrative position. You can either decide to avoid investing resources or gamble on the 5 unreleased elements. All in all, the Geo version of the Traveler is slightly weaker than the other one, but if you're into long-term speculation, it could pay off in the end. This playful bard will be sought after by many. Venti is in high demand due to how he can efficiently gather all enemies in a single spot. The Spiral Abyss and domains are feared by many not because of the monsters that reside within, but how much time you're given to take care of them. Venti's biggest selling point is his elemental burst. He fires off an arrow that sucks in anyone along the way and creates a vortex at the end that keeps enemies trapped within it. Most importantly, his elemental burst has average energy requirement and pretty low cooldown, so with the right equipment and team composition, you can expect to have a reliable vortex almost every time. Venti is an extremely useful support character that will allow you to conquer the floors of the Spiral Abyss. The renowned chef of Liyue, Zhangling, can be unlocked for free after clearing the Spiral Abyss 3rd floor. She's an excellent supporter that can provide constant pyro-elemental reaction. Her skill summons Guba, a bear that eats a chili pepper and spews fire every few seconds. The elemental burst creates fire tornadoes that revolve around you and will remain even if you switch to another character. While both the damage output from Guba and Pyronado aren't jaw-dropping, the primary purpose of Zhangling is to provide her pyro to cause elemental reactions. Overall, she is an excellent choice if you're looking for a strong support character. Because Zhao was unavailable during China's soft launch, it's impossible to determine his tier just yet because he previously acted as a main damage dealer and we're unsure whether he will be buffed or nerfed during the official global launch. We keep our tier list updated on our website gachagamer.com, link in the description, so you can see his placement once the video is few days older. While some characters are busy healing others, Jingshu focuses on mitigating the damage. His primary mechanic revolves around rain swords. You generate them by either the elemental skill or burst. These swords remain even when switching to another character. Once you get damaged, one of these swords shatter and reduces the damage taken, and also heals the character based on Jingshu's max health. His elemental burst damages enemies around him while also preventing the swords from shattering for the duration, essentially giving you an infinite supply until the burst is over. He is an interesting character and proves useful for those who need a hydro support unit that can also mitigate damage. The problem with Jingshu is that he tries to do too many things at the same time, making him master of none. If you found this video useful, make sure to subscribe to our channel and enable notifications, as we will be coming out with more Genshin Impact content for you to enjoy. You can also visit us at gachagamer.com, where you can find a lot of useful guides and resources for Genshin Impact, including an up-to-date tier list. Thanks for watching us and see you in the next video.